In front of you and me, this is Belarus, the world's largest submarine at the moment. It's called the Russian weapon of the end. The main weapon is a nuclear torpedo across 6 Poseidon sites. It's thought to be capable of generating enough powerful tsunamis. It's full of radiation to destroy. It's a completely coastal city. So its appearance has raised concerns for the world, the Western office especially in November 2023. Russian President Vladimir Putin has canceled ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. However, is what the Russians claim to be true. That Belgorod, is it a superweapon that will bring about the end of the world? Or is this just the media trick of the Golden Mask to threaten their enemies? It's all going to be revealed in today's video. Handmade jewelry brand for men. Join the City team. Subscribe to the channel as well as support Helios products. Helios offers unique crafts and designed and engineered by Vietnamese artisans with the desire to bring Vietnamese products. Reach out to the world according to Global Firepower Russian Navy by the end of February 2024. He had in his fleet the number of ships the world's largest underground island. For a total of 65 pieces, unfortunately though for them, a lot of these are old. And there are those from the Soviet masters that are over 30 years old, even over 40 years old. In order to modernize its submarine force, the Soviet Union launched the Belgorod-class nuclear submarine. In July of the year 1992, after 30 years of research and development, it's based on a nuclear-powered ship. Oscar Belgorod originally had a design orientation to become a submarine called a navigator to threaten U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups. At the same time, Belgorod and its sisters, it is expected to be equipped with 24 P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles. They have a special feature. You can fire them all at the same time, in which the missile leads will send data back to the target for the remaining 23. And if this missile is intercepted, the next ones will replace it. Thanks, there only one Belgorod fleet had the power to attack at the same time. Many enemy fleets. That's what I promised. But in the year 1997, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation stopped this program. In the context, the country is in a difficult financial situation, post-showbiz period. But they still have hope of completing the construction, and always ready for the birth of Belgorod. By training the soldiers of the crew, however, the financial problems proved more complicated than expected. That's 3/4 of the submarine we're building. For many years, in the port of Severus, there's 2,000 shipwreck tragedies happening in the South China Sea. That's what made the Russians decide. Continue the Belgorod project as of Tuesday. December 2004, the hull is almost complete with only the engine missing. Missile silos and equipment 8 years after the sinking. And then Belarus's mission began to change. April 2nd, 19 ships launched, and by July 2022, this submarine is in service with the Russian Navy. And from a normal destroyer, he joined the 29th Submarine Division. It's a special unit of the Department of Deep Sea Research of the Russian Ministry of Defense. A change in duty. Belgorod's mission can be seen in its design. With length 184 meters, wide 18.2 meters, water capacity for floating and diving is 14,700 Is and 24,000 Ts, respectively. Belgorod has become the largest submarine active in the naval forces of the Russian Federation, as well as all over the world. It's capable of operating at a maximum depth of 520 meters and stay underwater for about 4 months, thanks to the nuclear reactor installed inside next to it. Belarus has a top speed of about 32 knots, with unlimited operating range VIVE. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, it can conduct search and rescue operations, research, and play a strategic deterrent role with 6 nuclear torpedoes, 2 MBA-9 Poseidon, the very weapon that was installed in the name of the CAI god, the sea and the ocean in Greek mythology. This is a factor that we need to analyze to clarify the purpose of Belgorod tones. The United States is the world's most powerful military superpower. It's also the biggest rival of the Russians. Interesting to equity in the hands of advanced systems. It can track any missile decided and launched on Earth, and even the weapons tests. China's ultrasonic gas party days 2021, they were also discovered. However, this is very unlikely to happen with Gulopos-Radin, especially when people aren't actively looking for it and get the U.S. Defense Forces in trouble, because there was no warning. To enhance Poseidon's surprise attack capabilities, the Russians claim that they've equipped it with stealth technology, make it invisible in front of underwater audio tracking systems deployed by the United States. Under the ocean, although it's true that Poseidon makes noise when it works, but it's just as noisy as civilian ships. From there, for the U.S. Navy, it is difficult to distinguish between threats powerful with all the traffic, or conventional trade on international waterways. Some sources of the country's airs also said that Horse Leopard can automatically reduce the speed to about 3 km/h as it approaches the target, making it harder to detect and counterattack, even in the last moments. In year 2018, President of Russia Vladimir Putin has officially announced the Poseidon project. It is in the process of development. At the same time, declare PR father that it's enough to defeat America's defense systems. A special feature of the Torpedo, this is that it can move automatically, opponent, omitary enemy, and enhanced performance by artificial intelligence. Nuclear advanced navigation sensor and obstacle avoidance sonar systems, According to Russian sources, when the deployment period ended, Poseidon can come back on his own. And there the manned ships will recover and crew carry out maintenance. Get it ready for the next mission. Thanks to nuclear power, the Torpedo is capable of 70 knots. That's about 130 km/h on the surface. According to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Poseidon's speed could even reach 100 knots above sea level. Operations or 180 km/h faster than many NATO submarines and torpedoes, with which it can operate at a range of 10,000 kilometers with a depth of more than 1,000 meters. Each Poseidon, it's a nuclear warhead with a yield of 2 megatons. It's 133 times more powerful than the Little Boy bomb, 95 Fat Man balls, and twice as powerful as the United States nuclear arsenal. The state is B8BA. Add to that some reports claim that in case of necessity, the Belgorod submarine can carry a 100 megaton nuclear warhead. It is twice as destructive as the SA bomb. The most powerful nuclear weapon in human history was detonated in the year 1961. But if this is true, Belgorod will become a terror for the naval bases and the coastal cities of the enemy. On November 2nd, 2010, Christopher Fark, when he was Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons by the White House, has expressed concern that Operation Poseidon could submerge the coastal cities of the United States by the radioactive tsunami. From the signs in the design, as well as intelligence obtained 10/4/2022 newspaper, Congressional Research Service reports, have shown that Belgorod and its Nugolopshatan are considered weapons of retaliation, not as a preemptive strike. In theory, if Russia's nuclear capability significantly damaged, the first attack of the enemy, Belarus, will remain at sea and ready to deploy in combat when ordered. It should be noted that although Operation can say the volcano, it has the most powerful nuclear deterrent on Earth at the present time, but it can also carry the Endis itself, usually the same in addition to its nuclear mission. Belgorod submarines will undertake a wide range of operations, especially under the sea, and installed the necessary equipment, such as a small nuclear-powered submarine. The Rosaric is mounted underneath its body. The Dato period. This gas is considered to be very useful for monitoring tasks. Aliwints or destroy critical underwater infrastructure, such as pipe cutting, internet cable, or 10 intelligence receivers. At the same time, it seems Belgorod will also act as a vessel, the mother of driverless devices. For this purpose, the ship was redesigned in year 2017 to replace the rocket bay with a larger storage area for underwater drones. Thus, the original length of Belarus was only 154 meters. It's increased by 30 meters like this. It doesn't stop. This nuclear-powered mini-drone has a length of 6.5 NFS meter in diameter and a range of about 27 nautical miles. Some estimates show HPSC can operate at a depth of 6,000 meters, but the more modest reports suggest that 2,000 meters is a more likely number. It's equipped a lot sonar and precision equipment to conduct missions in search of the enemy's infrastructure under the ice in the Arctic. However, the secret fleet will also be involved. The Black Sea Fleet and the Pacific Fleet, Russian Navy. According to Russian sources, HPSC designed for dual-use purposes. They're doing military work and doing scientific research. It's an American name, to camouflage for underwater intelligence operations. The secret to owning Half-Seeker, the Belgorod, will enhanced ability to collect 10 pieces of reconnaissance information. That's less of a risk to itself and its crew. To emphasize its importance in the Russian strategic system, Belgorod ship and crew not reporting to Navy commanders, but instead, they are directly responsible. Before President Vladimir Putin people at the same time, he is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This is considered fit-for-purpose special operations of the ship. On 29th day, 2022, Belgorod, it was captured by a European Space Agency satellite and the United States Geological Survey. I found out it's in the Arctic after a mysterious disappearance. According to European military officials, this submarine is moving to the Karablaya Sea to conduct Trident torpedo testing. That's raising concerns, although there is no sign that it's going to activate a nuclear warhead. However, 2 months later, CNN's military sources reported that Belgorod has left the testing area in the Arctic Sea and returned to port without testing. Americans believe that the Russians may have had technical difficulties and can't launch a torpedo. At the same time, with the water in the Arctic freezing just after winter, Belgorod had to dive under the sea. So the question is, where has it been, or what has it been doing since the fall of 2022? By 1st day 2023, the Russian Navy has received the delivery of nuclear torpedoes, the first Poseidon, and completed a number of performance tests when deploying them at different depths. By the end of 6th day 2023, Belgorod is thought to have left port Severodvinsk in the Russian Arctic. It happened at the same time as the rebellion of the Wagner Private Military Corporation, but the two events are said to be unrelated. At that time, Belgorod seems to be trying to do more experiments at sea for Poseidon torpedoes without notifying the United States. Pay attention to this, because this is a very unusual act, because in the past, Kremlin and the White House, we will inform each other about strategic weapons tests to prevent misunderstanding of Kiev's intentions, and that leads to the wrong decisions. Some Russian sources later reported that Belgorod, it also shows the ability to operate as the safety of the torpedo has been confirmed. Sea trials with torpedoes possessed supposedly it was scheduled for the end of summer 2023. But there's very little evidence. It shows that this plan has actually worked as expected out, even if Belarus. And all of its systems work just as well as the ads. There's still a problem to solve. As with the Suna 7 strategy and the T-14 Amarta tank, it's a shortage of numbers. Up to the present time, the Russians only have one submarine, Belgorod, in his fleet. And considering the long development period as well as international sanctions, after waging war with Ukraine, they are hard you can build any more in the near future. When you're alone, Belgorod can be easily tracked by satellite. All it has to do is rise out of the water port fall, and Russia's enemies will know exactly what it does next. Besides Moscow, they are also hesitant to deploy the latest equipment. And my best on the Ukrainian battlefield, this is evident in the absence of T-14 Amarta and the fact that Su-7 didn't fly over the disputed area. It's the same. We've never seen Belgorod go to war. Maybe the Russian Defense Ministry doesn't want to take that risk, to take the submarine that spent almost 35 years developing to the battlefield and turn every resource they've invested into it to become cocky. There are also many reasons to believe that Belgorod and Poseidon is not as good as the Russians say. First and most important, the ability to create a tsunami of randomness. It's happening both physically and technically. It is said that it is unlikely to happen. Nuclear weapons physicist at the National Laboratory Lawrence Livermore. 50 megatons can. Yes, it's just that it can cause a tsunami and hit the ocean with the same energy as the explosion, 650 kilotons. Some other people even think that 100 megatons is not enough to create a tsunami. If the explosion happened in the ocean near the shore, but that doesn't mean Poseidon isn't dangerous. According to a former Marine nuclear and electronics technician, U.S. troops, the wave born of the explosion, it's offshore, still contains trace amounts of radioactive material, enough to make a port or a coastal city. The area could not be inhabited for about a century. Despite this more modest claim, it doesn't bring much peace of mind to Washington. But there are other reasons to be suspicious. About Poseidon's ability to be advertised. This torpedo is huge in size. With length, 20 meters and diameter 2 meters. However, that's not enough to fit inside a reactor, large nuclear system city, keep it working for a long time. As the designers claim, the structure of Poseidon will need to be able to protect the navigation system and advanced artificial intelligence from nuclear radiation from its own reactor. In theory, this is entirely possible, but it's going to put limits on Torpedo, the nuclear reactor itself, on the Torpedo. It's also an issue worth considering. For those of you who don't know, nuclear reactor works by mechanism power converter from the splitting of atomic nuclei to generate heat. This heat energy then turns into steam, make moving, rewind bin generate power, and in the case of nuclear submarines, it's propulsion. According to Western experts, size of Poseidon is too small to carry around this complex process replication device. There are actually many ways to solve this problem, but those ways produce a pretty clear heat signature that even civilian satellites can track, not to mention the military. So Poseidon, we're facing a dilemma, or increase the size to accommodate. It's a traditional nuclear reaction and make it impossible to deploy from submarines. Or use the minimization process, making it vulnerable to detection and losing its invisibility. If Poseidon. It's got the power and the features that it's touted for. Russian engineers have to be really good, and is now in the hands of superior technology.
Compared to the West a few minutes ago. National knowledge refers to the research agency of the United States Congress classification. Poseidon, silk jade. It's an offensive nuclear weapon intended to retaliate. However, there are also some comments with that assessment. These experts think that a horse, called the god of the sea, fast, is fast, but it's too slow to be a retaliatory nuclear weapon. Instead, its characteristics are, make a better fit for a weapon, preemptive strike. They also say that, in peaceful conditions, it's more comfortable to monitor devices like Poseidon. That's because they can only work if you get into a position before you're hunted, where it's going to be close to the shore to create a tsunami big enough, as well as focusing radioactive contaminants on the target, to avoid being detected by water bubbles.
Born of the phenomenon of encroachment, Poseidon needs to dive at great depths. However, in general, the coastal areas are relatively shallow. Therefore, many experts assess the purpose of this torpedo. It's not aimed at ports or a coastal city. This seems to have been demonstrated through the use of Belgorod submarines and Poseidon torpedoes. In fact, the Russian Navy, by the end of 2023, there have been no reports of sea trials of Poseidon, and there's currently no concrete evidence that Belgorod is patrolling the waters off its coast. In addition, the Russian Doomsday Submarine is also reveal more problems when doing less important tasks. It's a mothership for submarines and mid-size unmanned diving equipment. For example, in July, year 2019, WWIII submarine damaged battery during testing off the north coast. Russian poles caused a catastrophic accident in which 14 crew members were killed. At the same time, raises big questions about WWIII's ability to function. From there you can see, to help the ship, it can actually cause a disaster. The end of the world, as the name suggests. Russians need to really get their hands on it, instead of just celebrating it in traditional media. In short, Belgorod and its power are very similar with some programs. Russia's other supposedly modern weapons, many boastful claims were made, but there's not much evidence to support the truth. So, you're the audience. What about Tony Robert Stark and its unique weapons? What is the true purpose of the Poseidon torpedo? Whether it can work like the Russians claim not to, or is it all just a paper tiger that gets a mask and built to scare the enemy West? Do not hesitate. Let us know your opinion in the comments section.